Using a 19mm socket, go ahead and remove all 5 lug nuts. Remove the wheel. I'm going to go ahead and throw on a couple lug nuts here just to keep the rotor stationary. Using a 21mm socket on the nut side and a 17mm wrench on the other, go ahead and loosen this bolt. Go ahead and take the nut right off. Using an 18mm socket, go ahead and remove the sway bar end link bolt. Get and work the bolt out of the end link. Go ahead and set that aside. Go ahead and remove the bolt for the lower portion of the spring and shock unit and set that aside. Using a 22mm socket, we're going to go ahead and remove the nut off of the lower ball joint. You can use a jack to go ahead and support the brake rotor, the knuckle, the hub. I'm going to go ahead and smack the side of the knuckle here, and this should release the ball joint. You can see that we put the nut back on the ball joint. We smack the lower control arm and that's separated from the ball joint. So we're able to remove the jack to support the front portion of the suspension. Now what we're going to do is going to come back to the control arm bolts, and these are cam bolts. You can see that they're offset from where the bolt is. What we want to do is go ahead and use a marker, a crayon, and mark the position. This will give you a preliminary setting for the alignment when you reinstall the bolt, and you want to do this for the front bolt as well. Using a 24mm socket, you're going to go ahead and remove the front control arm bolt. Sometimes you get a stubborn bolt and the impact gun won't work, so we're going to use a breaker bar. I'm going to go ahead and thread these nuts on a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and try and work these out. Now that we got the control arm bolts out, we're now going to go ahead and remove the nut for the lower control arm ball joint here. I'm going to go ahead and tap this, get that loose. Make sure the control arm does not fall on your feet. I'm going to go ahead and use a pry bar to gently work this out the rest of the way. Once we get that bolt started in there, we'll go ahead and install the forward mounted control arm bolt. And then we'll work them through the frame. So once you get these bolts put in with the cams, you want to make sure that the cam is inside this horseshoe bracket on the inside of the frame unit. You want to do this for both sides. I'm going to apply a little bit of anti-seize compound on this here, so if it ever needs to come apart again, it'll do so easy. Install the nut on the front control arm bolt and do the same for the back. I'm going to go ahead and just snug up these bolts. We're not going to tighten them yet. We want to make sure that the whole control arm is free floating so we can go ahead and get the suspension and the knuckle bolted back up. Do the same for the back bolt. All All right, so now we can go ahead and bring up the control arm into the ball joint. Work this into place. And just get this nut started a few threads. So we put a jack underneath the lower control arm. I want to go ahead and get the suspension lined up here. I'm going to go ahead and jack up the control arm to get this to line up a little bit better. Once it lines up, feed the bolt on through. Now I'm going to go ahead and use the bolt for the sway bar end link. Line that up. Go ahead and feed that on through. Go ahead and get the nut started on the back side here, and then we'll put the nut on the sway bar end link bolt. Once these are started, we can now go ahead and release the pressure from the jack. All right, we're going to go ahead and use our 18mm socket. We're going to go ahead and tighten the lower sway bar end link bolt to 100 foot-pounds. Torque that right on down. All right, using 11/16 deep socket, we're going to go ahead and tighten this down or torque it to 110 foot-pounds. Using a 22mm socket, we're going to go ahead and torque the lower ball joint nut to 60 foot-pounds. Now we went ahead and replaced our control arm bolts. Now if you remember, we had marked our previous cams on the bracket right here, and that is all gone. So what we're going to do is use your 24mm, and we're going to bring this out about right there. Now you are going to have an alignment done once you're done installing the control arm. So you want to do that so you don't wear out your tires abnormally. But you want to preset them to match the front and back bolt, and then we'll go ahead and torque these bolts down. Using your wrench on the inside to hold the cam and the bolt stationary, go ahead and torque these down to 125 foot-pounds. Ideally, when torquing these down, you want to have the weight of the vehicle on the control arms and have that suspension compressed to its neutral position. And do the same for the front bolt. Okay, go ahead and get that wheel installed. Get the lug nut started. You want to go ahead and get all of these started by hand. Several threads on. Let's go ahead and torque down the wheel to 100 foot-pounds. I'm going to do this in a crisscross or star pattern. And that's it.